Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players, uncover their stories, and discover what makes them tick. If you love guitar, music, and the backstory of people's lives, stick around. You're in the right place. Hi, this is Craig. Just want to let you know you can now advertise here on Everyone Loves Guitar podcast. For more information, go to everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. That's everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar. I have the honor and privilege to be talking with one of the most talented acoustic guitar players I've certainly ever heard. We're with Chris Eldridge from the Punch Brothers, and he's also doing a project with Julian Lage. He's been a member of the Punch Brothers since the band's inception, and he's been at the vanguard of acoustic music for much of the past decade, as a matter of fact. He was actually initially drawn to electric guitar, but as in his mid-teens, he switched over to acoustic, thanks, of course, to his dad, who was a banjo player and the founding member of the seminal bluegrass group, the Seldom Scene. Chris later gained in-depth exposure to loads of different musical styles while studying at Oberlin Conservatory in Ohio, where he earned a degree in music performance in 2004. And during that time, he also studied with legendary guitarist Tony Rice. After graduating, Chris actually joined the Seldom Scene, and he won a Grammy he received a Grammy nomination in 2007. In 2005, he founded the critically acclaimed bluegrass band, the infamous String Dusters. At the 2007 International Bluegrass Music Association Awards, the String Dusters won Emerging Artist of the Year, Song of the Year, and Album of the Year for their debut album, Fork in the Road. Meanwhile, in 2005, he had caught the attention of mandolinist Chris Thiel, who enlisted him, along with the banjo player Noam Pikelny, violinist Gabe Witcher, and bassist Greg Garrison, to start working on a side project. Soon, they all felt that they gelled, and they decided to focus all their collective energies into the band, and Punch Brothers was born. The band has since released 5 critically acclaimed albums. They've received 5 Grammy nominations and toured all over the world. Chris also plays in a duo with jazz guitarist Julian Lage. Like I said, they've released 2 full-length records and an EP. Their most recent record, Mount Royal, was also nominated for a Grammy for Best Instrumental Album. We're going to talk about that record today. I will tell you right now, it is literally one of the most beautiful albums I've ever listened to, and I'm not saying that because I'm here with Chris. And I told him I'm not even a guy that listens to acoustic music, but like, man, I was almost in tears listening to that thing. It's gorgeous. Chris is also he's a guitar player in the house band on the public radio show Live From Here, which is formerly called A Prairie Home Companion. He's also worked with a ton of different musical luminaries, including Paul Simon, Renee Fleming, John Paul Jones, talk about diversity there, and those Marcus Mumford, Justin Timberlake, T-Bone Burnett, John Brion, Fiona Apple, Elvis Costello, Jerry Douglas, Sarah Watkins, Del McCoury, and others. Chris, man, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Man, my pleasure. Thanks for having me here.
I'm exhausted just reading this.
Sorry,
this is going to be fun. No, this is going to be awesome. Hey, man, it is really unusual for a teenage male with testosterone surging through them to switch over from electric to acoustic. And I was curious, what made you do that? What was so compelling about the acoustic?
Well, for one thing, I just sucked really bad at electric guitar.
Well, I started out
playing.
That hard to believe.
Oh no, believe it. It's that's not false modesty. That is the truth. I got way into playing guitar when I was just to back up even before that, both my parents are musicians. They're both banjo players. Like you said, kind of in that intro, my dad played in this bluegrass band, the Seldom Scene. It was a pretty this really
super successful band. Yeah.
Yeah, very successful and very influential and cool. And they were really good. So I just grew up around these great musicians playing great music. And my mom, like on her side of the family, music is like the most sacred thing. And so I grew up listening to all kinds of different crazy stuff in the car. I just always loved music my whole life. And when I was 9, my friend Jay Starling, whose dad was also in the Seldom Scene, got a guitar, and he was somewhat of a child prodigy. He kind of started playing electric guitar, and within a year could just rip, pretty legit sounding Stevie Ray Vaughan stuff.
At 9 or 10?
He was 2.5 years older, so he was 11 or 12, and but he was kind of a prodigious shredder. Jay can just pick up an instrument and rip on it, and so I wanted to be like Jay. He was my hero. And so I was like, well, I want to do that. So I got into guitar kind of through that. And my big brother, Ben's also a really killer electric guitar player, like Allman Brothers, Stevie Ray Vaughan, absolutely could have been a professional if he'd wanted to. He's very, very talented. And I got into the Allman Brothers and all that stuff. But when it really kind of lit up for me is when I heard Eric Johnson. For whatever reason, and I was probably 10 at that point. For whatever reason, I heard Avia Musicom, and that just like blew my mind. It was like this life-altering moment, and like fireworks just going off, in my brain when I listened to that, and it really kind of did change my life. So that's what I was into. I was into the electric guitar, and he was like my superhero for a long time, and I wanted to do that. And I also loved Robin Ford, was a guy I was way into when I was a kid, and like Joe Satriani. There were a lot of electric guitar players. Like I never really liked Steve Vai or Yngwie Malmsteen. I was kind of like right on the edge of the shredder thing, where I kind of hated some shredders and loved like Eric Johnson.
Well, he's so melodic,
Satriani.
Eric Johnson.
Yeah,
he's very melodic. The other guys, maybe not as melodic. So I get it.
Yeah, so it was just this thing. I got really taken with it. But I think because I tried to dive into that stuff, I couldn't do it. It was like that's trying to jump into doing something at the Olympic level if you're trying to play like him when you've never, it's like getting in the pool with Michael Phelps and you can't even tread water. So I just sucked at electric guitar, but I loved music and I was really keen about it. And I started listening to a bunch of Return to Forever and like kind of jazz fusion-y stuff and John McLaughlin and diverse music. But the thing that kind of pulled me back into the acoustic guitar was when my mom got me this record by Tony Rice called Acoustics when I was probably, I think I was like 14. And she got it for me for Christmas. And it just blew my mind because it was really interesting, instrumental guitar music, powerful, virtuosic. It had this certain kind of intellectual thing going on with it that I found really compelling, but also it was coming out of bluegrass. I mean, Tony was a bluegrass guitar player who then kind of went and really expanded his horizons. And I think for me, having grown up, so much in the bluegrass world, there was something about that resonated, just the fundamental rhythm of the music being created entirely by a string band. There was just something about it that I kind of understood in this way that I never quite did. I never quite understood with the electric guitar. I never quite cracked a certain code about the electric guitar. And with acoustic, it was this sophisticated, virtuosic music that I felt like I could sink my teeth into, but somehow I also just understood how it worked on some fundamental level. And so as much as anything, it was just like, okay, I can be kind of good if I do this thing.
Yeah.
And I kind of started, I made a lot of progress quickly once I picked up the acoustic.
I would imagine because you're growing up in that environment, it was just in your DNA more so than I would think, no? Yeah,
well, DNA or just osmosis. I mean, I think like there's a thing about being around that music, and string band music is cool, man. It's just I don't know. It's organic and interactive. If you hear a good string band playing good time, there's no drummer. Everybody in the band is like a piece of the drum kit. Everybody's kind of working together.
Great point.
Yeah. So you hear like the sound of a great string ensemble, like, you know, if you have Tony Rice and Sam Bush and Mark Schatz playing together, I mean, that is a mighty cool, undulating, organic sound that just I always loved, and yeah, I mean, that was part of the deal. I mean, as much as hearing him play lead stuff, the rhythm guitar and just the whole rhythmic component of that music was just, I loved it. It was so interesting to me.
You made a really good point that I've never thought about, that there is no drummer there, and yet it is a very percussive music. Yeah.
Well, it's a very rhythmic, it's a very rhythmic music, and everybody in a string band, in a good string band, has to have great timing.
Yeah.
You have to have great timing. There's no getting around that. Whereas if you're, you know, playing electric guitar in a band with drums, you don't, not that people don't have great timing, but you don't have to have it in the same way. It's like you might have to have great feel, but like this kind of deep sense of groove is not a prerequisite the way it is for everybody in a string band.
Yeah, that's really, I'd never thought of that, but it's very true. Mm-hmm. What made you go to Oberlin? Like, are you from Ohio or?
No, I'm from Virginia. When I was looking at schools, I wanted to go to a good school, but I thought I was going to go study math. That was actually the thing that I thought I was going to do, because my dad, in addition to playing in the Seldom Scene, was also a mathematician. And so, and I always kind of had an aptitude for that sort of thing. And, so I thought I wanted to go and get like a normal job but be a musician. And Oberlin seemed like the perfect place where, you know, it was a cool school with like, interesting kind of weirdo people.
Yeah, it's like very. It's well known for like liberal arts kind of stuff. Yeah,
it's pretty out. But it also has this truly great music conservatory. You know, one of the best conservatories in the country. And so to me, that was this really cool thing to have both of those under one roof. And I thought I was going to study math or engineering or something like that, and then be around all these great musician kids and feel inspired. And it just turns out when I got there, my first year, I was not going to class. I was skipping class, sitting in my room in my boxer shorts, just playing guitar, 8 hours a day. And my teacher, I started taking, private lessons with the jazz guitar teacher there, Bobby Ferraza. And he quickly started, he was just on me. He was like, man, what are you doing? Like, just do music. Like, it's clear to everybody that that's the thing that you want to do. Like, just do that. And so eventually I kind of gave over to it and did. But the thing is, I mean, I did have this weird template growing up, and that my dad had a real job and was also a successful musician. And that's how the Seldom Scene was. That was what they did. I mean, one guy was he worked at National Geographic. They were in DC. So one guy was a cartographer at National Geographic. One guy was a commercial artist. One guy was a doctor. My dad had his gig working for, the Navy or wherever he was at any given time. And so, yeah, I just thought you could do that. And it turns out, now that I've been a professional musician for, a good long time, like you can't do that. That just doesn't happen. It was a weird fluke thing.
Very. Very. So far it's been undulating and cartographer. This is definitely the SAT episode here, man.
No.
Very cool. But yeah, that seems like very hard to do. And it did seem like that was a fluke, I would say. But I can understand your reluctance to jump into it full time, because in your sort of like young man programming, it's like, oh, that's not what you do. You have a job and then you play music.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's, and also my dad, no, not to say that he isn't, I think he's very proud of how it's all kind of happened and everything, but because he had been on both sides, I don't think he was particularly psyched about me being a musician. I think he understood how hard that can be. It's just that, that life comes with a lot of sacrifices.
Yes.
That are kind of on some like baseline level. And so, it didn't seem like a great idea to me when I was young, but it just kind of eventually became obvious that was the thing for me to do.
Once you said, "Hey, listen, this is my deal," were they supportive?
Totally.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and to be clear, totally 100% supportive. And my mom was always kind of a big ally for me with music. I mean, she was. I know with most musicians who I'm buddies with, like these kind of really talented people that I know, a lot of them have like real family support. Like that was a key component for a lot of people, is on some level like real support from people in their families. I mean, you can go another way, I guess, and where it's like an escape, if you're not lucky that way. But I've noticed that a lot of accomplished musicians really did have like great support.
Chris, you are 100% right, because I'm actually putting together an article now, because people always ask me, "Hey, what's the most common things?" And that is number one. I would say like between 90 and 95, and I've talked to 320, 30 guitar players, so I got a fair ballpark.
Yeah.
That is the common thing, that they had family support. Like you said, doesn't mean like you couldn't make it, but by and large, they had family support. So I think that does, when the numbers are that skewed that high, it really means something.
It's a real advantage. It's a real advantage to have people who, like in my case, I was self-taught. Like I didn't take lessons or anything. I mean, I took a few lessons when I was a kid, but I wasn't.
You're self-taught?
Yeah, basically. Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Wow.
Well, but I mean, you learn everything kind of as you learn it, and in time. Like I picked up a lot of stuff at school. School was really hard for me because Oberlin was a very classically oriented conservatory. And I took some guitar lessons at the local guitar store when I was a kid, but I never really had, like, a lot of my friends had like teachers, and I was their teacher, and they like ushered them through childhood. Whereas for me, I had some people show me some stuff, but I kind of just figured it out on my own, in my own weird way. But then when I got to college and became a music major, it was really tricky for me, because I did have my own just way that I'd come to understand all this stuff, and it was not very compatible with like traditional music pedagogy, like of reading music and oral skills. I mean, I had a good ear. That was my whole thing, was based on my ear, but I actually literally failed oral skills. I'd never failed anything before, but I failed like oral skills.
What is oral skills? Communication? What is it?
Oral, A-U-R-A-L.
Oh, okay.
Ear, basically ear training.
Yeah, ear training. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Where did you learn theory then?
In college, I feel like I learned I had this, maybe not the greatest attitude about it all. Like I kind of was like, I'm ultimately going to be playing this bluegrass or music that's kind of based off of it, like music like Bela Fleck plays. And so there was a part of me that never went all in on the theory thing. I never really knew that stuff in college. I knew it enough to like pass the class, but I never really internalized it into my own playing. And it wasn't until I got out of school that I realized how helpful that kind of knowledge would be. But I realized in retrospect that what I did definitely get out of college was I learned how to teach myself theory. Like I learned the basic parameters of how all that stuff works.
Can you be specific on like, what did you, just curious what you learned?
Well, I mean, I had to like just pass a few music theory classes, but that was very, they were all kind of classical theory oriented.
So it was more academic related than performance related?
Very much so. Like Cantus Firmus, like trying to write out like basic species counterpoint and this stuff that had nothing to do with me. But then learning kind of about voice leading, going from a 1 chord to a 5 chord. To me, it was just like a math exercise on a staff. But I think by doing that work, it kind of planted enough like fundamental seeds to where later when I did want to start thinking about what notes are in a chord, like a chord is made of a root, a third, and a fifth. Like, what does that actually mean? Like, what happens when you start moving notes around? I just had a little bit of background to where I could start thinking about that stuff and figuring it out in a way that was grounded to something. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, well, it does when you add in the one thing that I'm going to just question, that if this cements at home, and because you were playing so much, you knew the neck, so then the application of it wasn't incredibly difficult. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, and I would almost say that the application, it's only been in more recent years, like maybe in the last 5 years, that I've kind of come to think, to see the neck in terms of chords and notes. Because part of me being self-taught was that I didn't tend to see music in terms of absolutes. Like I didn't even know, like, if you wanted me to point out all the C sharps on the neck of a guitar, in my mid-20s is probably when I figured out what all the notes were, to actually know them instantly.
Yeah.
It was so I kind of learned everything by shapes. That's the nice thing about guitars.
Yeah.
It's a shape-based instrument. It's not like a horn or even a piano. If you want to play in a different key, you just do the same thing. Just move
it up
hand like a few inches up or down, and it's all the same. So I kind of learned how these shapes corresponded with certain sounds. And then when I kind of started thinking a little bit more in terms of the absolutes of, like, okay, I'm playing an A chord, and there's an A and a C sharp and an E and an A, and I know where all those notes are in the neck of the guitar. And so I just started kind of exploring and thinking about, like, meditating on that stuff a little bit more. And I'm still not a super theoretical guy, but I do kind of have enough fundamental grounding in that stuff that I feel like it can help me.
Yeah, man. You get how many Grammys?
Well, yeah, always bridesmaid.
But my point being, sometimes you only need to know enough, right?
Yeah.
Your dad was, as you said, a founding member of the Seldom Scene. He was also a mathematician.
Yeah.
And so you had high standards. And I was curious, what were some of the most important things you learned from your dad, both musically and lesson-wise? And also, did you feel, because those standards were so high, did you feel like pressure?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my dad, I always just admired him as a musician so much. Like, I always felt really proud that he was my dad, because I love his banjo playing. I think he's like a beautiful, creative banjo player. As soon as I kind of like was old enough that I was really getting into music and really caring deeply about it, I was lucky that I could kind of look to my old man and be like, wow, this guy's a badass. Like,
yeah.
That's how cool.
That is cool.
Is that. And so, yeah, in that sense, I was always really proud and looked up to him. I mean, I feel like the thing that he taught me, certainly about music, the most was the importance of timing. We were talking earlier about how my time sucked, or just electric guitar. When you're playing electric guitar, it's not as much of a focus. Well, my dad was maybe the person who drove that home to me the most, because I'd be trying to play like, Eric Johnson or whatever, and he'd be like, your time, like there's no, your timing sucks. Like you're not playing. Or I'd go and play a fiddle tune with him, like try and play rhythm guitar, and I just couldn't play in time. And he was always like, timing, you got to get your timing together, rhythm, your timing. And eventually, for whatever reason, one day that kind of clicked, and I kind of found the time. So I really kind of credit him with just kind of being pretty relentless about, like, yeah, you're learning all this stuff, but it doesn't matter. Like, you need to have good time.
Yeah, that's great. What a good, you're right. How cool is it that your dad taught you this.
Yeah, it's amazing.
What a nice thing as a father-son, what a nice thing to share together.
It was so cool.
Yeah.
My dad, I mean, my brother, to be fair, to give credit to him, was always also saying the same thing, like, bro, you need to learn to play in time. God. Yeah, it was really cool. And then, as I got older and once I started playing with the Seldom Scene, which was like pure nepotism, coming, they'd never had a guy who just played lead guitar in the band. There was already a good rhythm player. But when I got to do that,
good. It was pure nepotism, but if you sucked, it wouldn't have, you wouldn't have been around long either. So, there's a big difference between having somebody open the door for you.
Yeah.
And then keeping the door open.
Yeah. That's
on
fair.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I embarrassed myself up there. I think that was okay. But what was so cool about that was just getting to like travel with my dad and play music with him and like get to hit the road. Cause my parents, got divorced when I was 3. I was very young.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And they were really cool. I was super fortunate in that they were and remain to this day friends. Like my dad and stepmom last year drove down to Florida and had Thanksgiving with me and my mom and my stepdad.
That's really cool.
Like,
that's rare.
But it's rare, but it's cool.
Good for you.
They were always cool, but still I didn't grow up in the house with my dad.
Sure.
I lived with my mom. And so when I got older, it was this cool thing for us to do together. It was like this great way to get to spend a lot of time doing this fun thing with my dad. That I'm really kind of appreciating how cool that actually was. Because as an adult, it's not often that you get to like do that kind of thing with your parents, unless you like work with them or you live right next door to them or something.
Yeah, and trust me, you don't have any kids, right?
No.
Trust me, your dad appreciated every minute of that. As a guy who's got kids, trust me, he more just the same way you appreciate it more now, he appreciates it even more now. Because there's certain moments I had with my kids that, as we've both gotten older, we appreciate it more. We talk about it, So it was both ways, man. That's really cool.
Yeah, I feel real lucky in that respect. So yeah, it's cool.
Very awesome, man. Talk about Punch Brothers, how they came together, because in some ways, in the not randomness, but in the this isn't planned, let's do this kind of way, it seems similar to what I read about how the Seldom Scene came together.
Well, that Punch Brothers is actually pretty different. So Punch Brothers kind of came. It really was put together by Chris Thiele, who wanted to, he was a guy who we'd all admired so much because he started making records, and putting them out on a label when he was 12. He was always a child prodigy. And by the time he was like in his mid-teens, he's a year and a half older than me. By the time he was in his mid-teens, it was clear that this guy's like a genius and he's kind of a leading light for our music. And so I certainly looked up to him a lot, and everybody my generation looked up to him a lot, and everybody younger than us looked up to him a lot. So he called me and Noam and Gabe and Greg Garrison to make a solo record. Because he played in this band Nickel Creek that had gotten like really popular. I mean, they made a record that went platinum, and they were just very popular. That's
almost unheard of now.
Yeah. Oh, it's totally
for a record to go platinum. I mean, that's like
they put it out in the nick of time. I think that record came out in like 2000 or 2001. It was like before streaming and Napster. Napster was just becoming a thing.
That's what really I think destroyed. I mean, totally off topic. I don't want to spend time.
Totally.
But yeah, that's like after that. I think everybody was like, great, I don't have to pay for music anymore. And that was
it just really devalued the whole thing. It's unfortunate. And then the whole economy of making records disappeared. And the long term, if you like look at that way down the road is just like, you're not going to have music being made by people who aren't going to sell tons of money, because the way Spotify works is it's a winner take all economy. It doesn't matter if you pay your $9.99 a month and only listen to, the Allman Brothers. The Allman Brothers are not going to see, any of that. Taylor Swift is going to see all your $9.99 because, because that's how it works. It's like all the money that goes in gets split up and kind of divvied out depending on how many total streams the platform creates. Whereas before, if you just wanted an Allman Brothers record, you just pay for an Allman Brothers record and they'd get some of that money.
I didn't realize it. So they weight percentage to total listens. They don't divide it evenly.
No, not at all. So I'm simplifying, and I know there are other things. Different people can negotiate different rates and things, but basically that's how that works.
Wow.
And so, so it used to be that you could have kind of low-level folk artists, or just not even folk, but just anybody who wouldn't be a huge commercial force, who could still actually make money that could supplement, like in a real way, making a living.
Sure.
Through selling albums, and that's not the case anymore.
Did you see that thing on Facebook? And I don't know if it's accurate because it's like going around so much. Is it true or not? Supposedly Peter Frampton was in front of some congressional group and he said, for 55 million streams of Baby I Love Your Way, I got $1,700. Again, I don't know if that's true, but supposedly when he said it, they were all like, oh, we got to do something about this. But
that's
crazy, man.
That sounds possible. Yeah, that really might be. I think like if you stream 1 million streams of something, like I think you make theoretically about $4,000 as an artist if you don't have a record label, or that's how much a label would get paid. I think it's something around there, but yeah, if you have a label, then they're going to get a cut, and maybe like you've got some weird thing where you're only going to get a song royalty, and that's a super tiny portion. And yeah, it's possible that with 55 million streams, he literally could have gotten $1,700. That's entirely possible.
God, that's awful.
Yeah, it's messed up. So
anyway, we were talking about Punch Brothers coming together and Chris Thile.
Oh, right. So Thile he was already like famous and successful by the time he was, legit like commercial success by the time he was 22. And so he put together, he wanted to make, because he really is like a genius musician. I mean, he won a MacArthur. So I hate to throw that word around. It's a lame word, and especially say it about someone you work with so closely. But I don't know. I just think it's fair, and especially if people listening to this aren't familiar with him, it's just kind of apt. So he wanted to. We all admired him a lot, and he wanted to make this record where he was going to essentially do a through composed piece for bluegrass instruments, but written down, counterpoint, just like large scale forms, the whole thing, essentially like a little classical suite for bluegrass instruments. And we were like, absolutely, that sounds awesome. And so we started working on it, and just when the five of us got in a room, it kind of became pretty clear that we should be a band. I mean, Frank, just the basic thing is there was just a real magic chemistry, and we all realized that we had a lot of the same things. We liked old bluegrass, and we knew how to play fiddle tunes. Like that was a thing we'd all dedicated a considerable amount of our time learning to do and, do well. But also we all loved Glenn Gould. Like we all had spent a lot of time geeking out listening to Glenn Gould play Bach, and we all loved Radiohead. Like we were all like fanatics about Radiohead, and we all, there were all these various overlaps of things that we loved. And when we got together to play, a lot of that kind of came out. There's just kind of a great chemistry. And of course, like there was a lot of stuff that didn't overlap, and that's like part of why the future is exciting.
Yeah.
You meet people who have a lot in common, you kind of connect, and then you realize, oh, I can learn this from you, and this and this and this, and so we decided to make it a band
instead of just a one-off project. It was like, let's do this.
Yeah,
let's all commit to this, and everybody had the time and the interest to do that, or was willing to make the time.
We made the time. I mean, it was pretty. It was tough for me because I was in the String Dusters, and that was like also a very serious band that I loved very much, and I loved all those guys, and I was really proud of it. But did you basically leave them, or yes.
and that? Yeah,
mm-hmm.
That was probably really tough for you, I'm sure.
It was incredibly tough. It was not an easy or happy time.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But we got through it, and ultimately it was, I think it worked well for everybody. I mean, and kind of started embarked on this crazy journey with Punch Brothers that kind of pushed me so far beyond what I ever would have imagined.
What a great thing to happen to you musically, though. Like you couldn't wish for a better thing, No,
exactly. That's the thing. That's something that you could not say no to.
Yeah.
It's not a thing that you could take for granted. Like something like that, if you're a lifer musician and something like that comes up, it's like, you got to go,
Where were you guys, like, logistically when this all happened?
Punch Brothers, like, where did all the five of us live?
Yeah.
When it came together, Noam Pekelny and I were in Nashville, and Thiele was living in New York, and Gabe Witcher was living in LA, and Greg Garrison was living in Denver.
Wow. And then you all decided to move to
we all moved to New York. And shortly, when that happened, we had a new guy, Paul Coert, joined the band because Greg had kids and he just wasn't able to kind of go all in the way that we were wanting to do. But yeah, we all moved to New York and all lived in the city together for about 3.5 years.
Was that the first time you'd been in the city?
Well, I'd been there, but I hadn't. Yeah, that was the first time I'd ever spent a lot of time there. I used to date a girl when I was in college who was from New York, and so I'd go up there every now and then and hang out. But this was definitely a kind of new experience. She was like rich, so I had this very particular experience of New York, and then it was like, okay, I'm moving here as a musician who makes definitely below the poverty line kind of money. And it was a different thing, but I love New York. I mean, it's such an amazing city. It's just filled with incredible people. And, I mean, that's just it. I love that it's such a melting pot of humanity. I love that about New York. I absolutely love it. And you can have a transcendent experience from all these different angles. You can just decide you want to go do something and have like this truly transcendent experience. Go to a museum and like sit with some of the greatest art that like man has ever produced, or go down to, I lived in Park Slope in Brooklyn, and go over to Bar Bez, which is this cool little bar, and like hear these like incredible, like some of the, most epic gypsy jazz musicians, like guitar players you'd ever want to hear, or go to a restaurant and have a meal that like you'll remember for the rest of your life. Like, it's crazy. It's a crazy, crazy city. And everybody, because it's also so crazy and so expensive, everybody's hustling. And that's just a incredible, when you're in your 20s, especially. I mean, I moved up there when I was, I guess I was 25, and like everybody around me was hustling, because that's just what you have to do. And so you start hustling too, and it makes you work harder, makes you focus more. It was just great.
Did you ever see Smokey Hormel at Bar Bez?
I never, you know what? I've seen Smokey Hormel. He is awesome. That guy is so killer. Mm. He and Gabe Witcher were buddies from LA.
Okay.
But I never got to know Smokey, but I definitely saw him a few times, and he's killer.
Great player. Yeah. Interesting guy. Super interesting guy. I interviewed him, and I think honestly, he might have had more like celebrity with just musical stories than anybody else. I mean, it was just like, I could have spoken to him for a day. It was just one story after another. So, And it's interesting that you said that I grew up there, and the work.
Oh, in Brooklyn.
No, I grew up in the Bronx, actually, which is the opposite end of the D train. There's no reason to go there. But
the botanical gardens.
The botanical gardens are nice. But the work the hustle there is, man. And when I moved, I'm in Florida, and I've been here since '89, I guess. That, like here, it's not as bad now. And I'm in Tampa, which it's a little better work ethic than the East Coast. But, when I came here, the thought of like, you call a service person and, okay, I'll be here between 1 and 5, and they don't show up. And then, hey, like, what happened? Oh, my guy was out today. That was a foreign concept to me. Like, how do you have a business?
Yeah.
Because of what you said, you're on there, man. You don't have time, or you can't afford to not be.
Yeah. It's an incredible environment.
Yeah.
I mean, I really loved it. And I also just like I said, on a human level, I just loved that everybody's smashed in together.
Yeah.
Like this melting pot of humanity.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I grew up with, accents I can recognize accents, understand because of that. That's just, that's what it is, which is great. You learn everything, you're exposed to everything, and you're not afraid of anything. Nothing's like, weird or like out of place for you. So yeah, that was a really good benefit of that, man.
Totally.
And you can talk to everybody too. So
yeah.
Okay. So talk about, man, I want to hear about these. You've worked with some really cool people, and I'd like to know how you got the gig, and if you have a cool or interesting story about working with them. And let's start with the guy from New York, from Queens, Paul Simon.
Oh yeah. Well, that was through Punch Brothers. We actually went on tour opening for him back in 2011.
Wow.
Which was really cool, really fun. And, we were out with him, it was only like 3 weeks, but really cool. And he was incredibly generous, and he invited us to play with him a few times on that tour. Like for his encore, we would become his band and go up and play songs with him.
Oh my God. That's so amazing.
Which was really cool. It was really cool. And then more recently, when Thiele took over hosting for A Prairie Home Companion, the first guest he had was Paul Simon. He called Paul up, and Paul, Paul came and did the show. And so we were his band. And we actually got to debut a new song with him on the show, the song Wristband. It was on his last record. So, I mean, that was like what an amazing, crazy privilege that was to get the email, forwarded like, okay, here's this song we're going to learn now, and we're going to play it. And it was, he's always been, I don't know him that. I mean, if I saw him on the street, he may or may not know who I was, but he's just like super, nice guy, but very serious, and just wants his music to be, kind of the way he wants it. He's very kind of clear ideas. When we were on tour with him, it was cool watching him. He was 70 at the time, I think. And it was cool watching him sound check with his band every day, because their sound checks would be like 2 hours long.
Oh, wow. They're not screwing around.
Yeah. And like for someone at that stage of his career, like he could just fly in on his jet like 2 hours before the show, not skip sound check, just walk on stage, walk off and leave. But he didn't do that at all. He would come for the whole sound check, and they would rework old songs. They'd like spend the whole sound check working, and he'd kind of pull things apart and put them back together. And it was really cool. It was inspiring to see that someone at that point was still so engaged creatively. Like he just had not checked out at all.
Yeah, and what a work ethic.
Singing his ass off. I mean, we actually just saw him. They played
Nashville.
Here, Yeah, they played in Nashville, a couple months ago, and I went out to the show, and he was singing great. He was singing so well. It was really cool. But yeah, he was a gentleman, and just really, I don't know. It was a real highlight. It's Paul Simon.
Yeah. Was Jim Oblon playing with him back then?
Jim Oblon was on that tour, the tour back in 2011, and he was just playing with him when we saw him, a couple months ago. He's kind of been there the whole time.
Tremendous guitar player.
Yeah, he's a badass. Yeah. He'd play some like kind of Chet style stuff in the show.
Yeah. Really good guy. Very interesting guy. Super creative mind. Very percussive. Originally a drummer. Really talented guy. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a badass, no doubt.
All right, man. This is the guy I've been wanting to talk to you about, John Paul Jones. So I grew up listening to Zeppelin, of course. Tell me how did this happen, and like what was this like?
JPJ. Okay, first of all, he is just such a gentle man. He's a gentleman, but just also a gentle man.
Yeah.
He's the total sweetheart. I kind of got to know him through he loves folk music, and actually he started playing mandolin and started hanging out with Thiele, because Thiele's like the great virtuoso of that instrument. So he did a tour with Nickel Creek back in the early 2000s, and started kind of hanging around our community. And I didn't really know Thiele then, but I kind of got to know him better because my girlfriend played in this band called Uncle Earl, which was like an old time string band, and John produced their second record.
Oh, okay.
And so I kind of got to know him through Uncle Earl.
How the hell do you get John Paul Jones to produce your record?
He just had taken this real interest in like American string band music, and Uncle Earl was awesome. I mean, they're like there's no band you'd rather. They don't really play much anymore. I mean, they'll do a few shows a year, but back kind of in their heyday, like there was no band that you would be happier to see on a festival lineup for just the combination of like music and good vibes and just everything. Uncle Earl was rad, and I don't know. John just wanted to produce their record, and so he did, and so I kind of knew him through that, but then I just would cross paths with him, and I played guitar on a record that he produced for Sarah Watkins back in like 2007, which was just really a highlight for me because it's JPJ, and I'd kind of known him socially and a little bit musically, but that was a real cool thing to get that call.
Where does he live? Does he live in the States?
He lives in London.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Mm-hmm. But he's got I don't think he has a house in the States, but he's got his main residence is in London. And he's just like, man, he's a great guy and such a badass musician, such a killer musician.
Incredibly talented. I mean, brilliant guy.
And very, very humble about it too. I mean, he's a master musician, but he wants to learn. He's really interested in learning. I know he went to a fiddle camp, like a bluegrass camp, about 10 years ago, just as a camper, and he was like totally unassuming, didn't pull any kind of rocks. He was just a guy in the class with a fiddle or a mandolin or whatever he was playing at that camp. And I think like halfway through the week, someone figured out like,
oh my God, that's John Paul Jones.
But you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of people wouldn't do that, wouldn't put themselves in that position, especially if you're like someone that, mighty.
Yeah.
But he couldn't be bothered with it. He loves music and wants to be a better musician, and was really kind of pure and beautiful in that way. Now, all that said, I kind of knew him as this, like I say, this very gentle person and just wonderful musician and just all around good guy. But I got to see him do his rock star thing a couple of times. At Bonnaroo, like 10 years ago, he did this super jam thing. It was like him and Questlove and Ben Harper playing Zeppelin songs. And and it was to see him walk out on stage and the crowd I've never seen a crowd go crazy like that. And I'd known this guy, right? And he just walked out and he was like a lion. I mean, it was like he grew like 40 feet and he just owned this. There was this whole other side where he was like, okay, now I'm going to be
John Paul Jones.
Fucking Paul Jones.
Yeah, man. That's great.
Yeah, it was really cool.
That's a great story. You know what? I haven't met a guy John's stature, but I've interviewed a lot of guys that are under that, you know, maybe one tier under that.
Yeah.
And, and I've hung out with some of these guys when they come down here, they're passing through town, and most of them are like that. They would like, you know, I've been into a guitar store with some of these guys and they never say a word. They're like just another customer. And then all of a sudden someone will say, "Oh my God, are you so-and-so?" And you're like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh my God." And the first thing, "Can I get a picture?"
Yeah, totally.
The selfie.
There's actually a funny story that Kristen told me. My lady, she went to Guitar Center with John because they were in the middle of making the record. And John was just like, I'll go with you, which I would never go to Guitar Center if I were him, but he was game. So they rode over to Guitar Center to buy like whatever they had to buy. And they got in and out. Nobody said a word, but so I was just like, man, this cat is brave going into that is the belly of the beast, man.
Yeah.
If you're something like that.
Wow. What a great story, man. Thank you for sharing that. I'm really glad you get to have that experience. It sounds like a lot of fun.
Thanks. Yeah.
How about Jerry Douglas?
Oh, Jerry's the man. I mean, you know, Jerry's, just the greatest dobro player ever. And he, let's see. I mean, I've known Jerry for a long time. He and my dad were friends back in the 70s. And I've kind of, looked up to him. Once I started becoming like a more serious bluegrass player, you know, my superheroes, the guys who wore invisible capes that me and my friends could all see. Yeah. Were Bela Fleck and Jerry Douglas and Tony Rice and Sam Bush and Mark Schatz, Edgar Meyer, Mark O'Connor. But Jerry was part of that crew. Like they were actually, that was like they were a posse kind of.
Sure.
And so I just kind of always admired him so much. And man, I don't know. I've known him for so long. He asked me to play. I played on one of his records, about 10 or 11 years ago. It was at Nickel Creek Farewell Show at the Ryman. I was sitting right next to Jerry, and he was like, "Hey, I'm making a record. Do you want to come in and play guitar on this song? I've been trying to figure out what to do with it." I was like, "Yes, I would. That would be my honor." And so it came in and just played on this track. But I've kind of known Jerry for ages, and he's just, man, he's a character. He's so funny, just great guy, wide open human being. Just absolutely, he's wide open. And, one of the most beautiful instrumentalists you'd ever want to hear. He's just so powerful and lyrical and delicate. And like, it's like everything you want out of like a human playing music. Yeah. Very kind of has got it all at his disposal.
Something just went through my mind. I've interviewed like probably 4 or 5 bluegrass players now. And almost everybody I interview is really open, but you guys are especially open for some reason, and I can't quantify it or qualify it. And I'm trying to think how I could articulate it and give an example. You're just very relaxed about being open.
Well, I think, thank you for saying that. I mean, I think that makes sense to me because, we kind of come from a music that has like a real sense of community embedded into it. like bluegrass. Now, bluegrass is actually, people think that bluegrass is old timey music. It's actually not. Bluegrass itself, at least what bluegrass means to me. I mean, to some people, Mumford and Sons are bluegrass, and Bela Fleck and the Flecktones are bluegrass. To me, like, no, those are not. Neither one of those is bluegrass at all. But bluegrass.
What would you consider Bela? What would you consider Bela?
Well, Bela does bluegrass stuff sometimes, but the Flecktones, like where he's got Victor Wooten playing electric bass and he's plugged in his harmonica, and Future Man's playing his Synthax drumitar, like essentially MIDI drums on, like that's, I don't know, that's, I mean, I actually hate, here I am. I
know
what bluegrass is, but it's never fun talking about what, genre because it's not really, it doesn't actually have much to do with the heart and soul, to the actual real nuts and bones where the bodies are buried kind of content of what any music is. But that being said, I mean, they're kind of more of like a, I don't know,
pop bluegrass, pop jazz.
I wouldn't call them bluegrass at all. To me, there's nothing bluegrass about the Flecktones other than the fact that there's a 5-string banjo. But it has more in common with like kind of fusion, to my mind, like kind of old school fusion.
No, that's fair.
Does with, if you wanted to associate it with a recognized musical movement, but even that's not fair because I don't know. It's music. I don't know. I kind of bristle at that sort of thing a little bit, but anyway, like I think you kind of can talk about bluegrass in the context of Bill Monroe, who invented this music. And just to get back to, I was just going to make a brief little point about that, which is please. Bluegrass is only like 70 years old. Like this music came together in 1946, where you actually had like Earl Scruggs playing 3-finger banjo in the way that he kind of invented. And someone, when he died, someone said the best thing about Earl. They said, close your eyes and imagine the sound of the banjo. What you're hearing is the sound of Earl Scruggs. That what you're hearing is Earl Scruggs. And I think that's so cool. Like it's a guy who just sort of defined the way a whole instrument sounds to just any old lay person. But so it was Earl and Bill Monroe. And, Bill kind of had this backbeat, where I'm clapping. He kind of really put that in, and he sang high, and he had Lester Flatt playing guitar, and the bass would kind of sitting on 1 and 3. The band kind of came together, and all these various roles sort of became defined into this sound that was new. Nobody played like that before they did. It was pretty interesting, kind of revolutionary music. And looking back from it from our perspective now, it's just sounds like old music. But at the time, like he really had, that was a new alchemy of sounds. And it was kind of, it was born around the same time, even a few years after bebop was.
Yeah.
As hard as that may be because that was happening in the early 40s.
Yeah.
And the bluegrass kind of really solidified in like the mid 40s. I forget where I was going with that. I ran off on a tangent.
No. I was talking about how the bluegrassers that I've talked to are so, I mean, musicians in general, specifically guitar players, are open, but man, bluegrassers are like really incredibly comfortable. I mean, I can't explain it because everybody's been real good, but
yeah. Well, again, yeah, there's a community. There is this community aspect of the music, and the music that came before bluegrass, especially. We kind of these days call that old time music, and that's like people playing fiddle tunes. And if you went to a session of people playing fiddle tunes, you might have that in a bar or a pub or something.
Sure.
And you might have like 5 fiddlers sitting around in a circle, or 10 fiddlers even sitting around in a circle playing a tune, essentially in unison with little variations cropping up, and maybe a rhythm guitar player, and maybe a banjo player, maybe a bass player. But it's this music that you can kind of get into and you kind of trance out to it. Originally that stuff kind of evolved to play for dances. It was like a community thing. So you'd have a bunch of fiddlers come together, or even just one fiddler, but they'd play for people in a community, in like a rural community, to get together and have a dance. And so it was always just at its core, it's been this communal music. And then, and then bluegrass kind of came out of that a little bit. And I think, most bluegrass musicians are accessible to other fans. And I mean, it's also, look, none of us are like famous, not in the real scheme of what that means. It's pretty earthy stuff. And so, yeah, it's just kind of music that where community is kind of baked into the essence of its DNA.
I think the word I was looking for as you were speaking, it came to me. You guys are very open to making connections, which everybody I've talked to is open to sharing. I mean, 95% of the people. Yeah. But you guys are really open to allowing connections. And I've noticed that specifically with everybody that I've interviewed in your genre.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And that's why when I think Brian turned me on, like, yes, I want more bluegrasses. Because that's cool. I mean, how cool is it to connect with somebody? I mean, when you have a good, it's like awesome. How cool is that? So I was like, yeah.
I'm loving this right now. We've never spoken before. Other than setting this up.
Likewise, man.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to talk about your new records. You got 2 new records out, one with the Punch Brothers and one with Julian. I want to talk about the tracks. Let's talk about the record with you and Julian.
Yeah.
First of all, again, I just not to, say the same thing, but it's called Mount Royal. It is a gorgeous, beautiful record. I mean, it's
thanks so much.
The melodies are great. The playing is great throughout. It's very melancholy, but there's like really simple melodies that are easy to understand. But what I dug about it was the guitar playing. It's not simple playing, and that takes work where you have intricate playing, but simple melodies. It's not like most of the time when you have intricate playing, it's like it's all over the place, and the melodies are not simple. They're difficult to follow. This was totally opposite. And to me, it just made everything really rich, really robust, even within the sense of melancholy that some of the songs had.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for putting it out. It's beautiful, and I hope it does great. First question is, how did you and Julian hook up? I know this is your second record, I think, correct?
Yeah, it's our second full-length record, and we actually made an EP as well. But we met it's been over 10 years now. He came to a Punch Brothers show in Boston at the Museum of Fine Art back in 2008. And he was going to he had a recording date, with Chris Thiele and Bela Fleck. They were going to do some trio stuff for Jules's first record. And so he came to the show and just needed to store his guitar somewhere. And so he came backstage to leave it there. And we just kind of hit it off, as guitar play, birds of a feather.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, what you got in there? And we were like, hey, you want to play a tune? And we wound up playing a fiddle tune, and it was, really quickly, it got deconstructed from being just a normal fiddle tune. And, I'll play rhythm, take a solo, and then we'll swap. And it kind of quickly became like this thing got deconstructed, and we started kind of actually really improvising together in a way that I hadn't had many experiences with people on that level, where they were just so willing to have it turn into a true conversation, as opposed to just like, okay, now I'm going to solo and you're going to play rhythm. And when we did that, it was just really fun. He was like this incredibly empathetic partner in that respect. And we just had a lot of fun doing it, and kind of remembered like, oh, that's cool. And stayed in touch. And he moved to New York a couple of years after that. And we played a couple of gigs together, just kind of for fun, but always had talked about doing something like, hey, we should have a guitar thing. Like, let's do a thing where we celebrate the acoustic guitar. And we finally I had a pause in the Punch Brothers schedule in 2013. I knew I was going to have some time off, and I just called him up and I was like, hey, you want to actually do this? Should we like call our people and have them book some dates? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. And that was that. Like, our thing was born. And also Jules he really is one of my most cherished friends. I love him. He's such a beautiful person.
That's great.
Yeah, I just love him so dearly. And so it was really fun to kind of have this great musical connection with someone who's like a really close and important friend. And yeah, it kind of just turned into a thing, and we made these records and gone on the road, and yeah, that's it.
Very cool, man. I want to talk about a few of the songs on there. First track, I think, is also, it's called Bone Collector. I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the longer tracks, not the longest, but one of the longer tracks. It's like almost 5 minutes long, but I was disappointed when it ended. I felt like it seemed like it could have, it was, I don't know. It's just like it could have gone on longer. It was I felt like it was like a tease.
Good.
It was really, and I was curious, like, what's the backstory to that, and what guitar were you playing on there?
Well, on that entire record, and actually the previous full-length record that we did, which is called Avalon, I was playing, I've got a 1937 D18, and I was playing that on both of those records. And actually, Jules played on both of those records. He's got a 1939 0018 that he used. Yeah, so those two records are the same two guitars, front to back. And yeah, I don't know, where did that song come from? We had spent some time starting to work on writing. We actually recorded that record in September of 2016, but I think we first got together, the first writing session we did was October the year before.
Oh, wow. So this has been in storage for a minute.
So we had time in on it.
Yeah, that's great.
And had another writing session in March, and I think another one in May of 2016. So it was something that, because we don't live in the same city anymore. I moved down to Nashville in 2015. So
and he's still up in New York. He's still up in New York.
He's still in New York, yeah. But we had to kind of put it on the calendar. Whereas when I lived in town, just be like, "Hey, you around? You want to get together?"
Sure.
So we had to kind of be a little bit more deliberate about it, but we spend 5 days hanging out together and working on music. And I don't know, Bone Collector just kind of came out of that. It, you know what, though, it came into its final form. We did a lot of this stuff. We made demos, and we actually tried recording. We recorded the record sort of 3 times. We actually had a date on the calendar in July of 2016 where we were going to make the record, and we wound up recording it, and we did it 1 week, and then we did it again a week later. And the first time was really just to see what we had, like almost do like a practice run of the record. And then we did it again, and it just, with a little bit of distance, we realized, Tony Rice told me a really wise thing once. He said, if you can make a record, like, make it and then step away from it for a little while. Put it away. Yeah, don't listen to it if you can do it for 8 months, that's the best. But, if you can only manage a week, do that. And we stepped away from it, and it was like, yeah, it's just not actually what we want it to be. So we kind of rewrote a bunch of it in early September. We taught at this really wonderful camp out in Montana, the Crown of the Continent guitar camp on Flathead Lake. Really cool thing, actually. But anyway, we were out there, and we had time, and we just use our free time during the day to start rewriting this stuff. And some of those main themes from Bone Collector were things that that da 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 da, and those chords especially used to be something that we had called Kanye. It was almost like a record. We'd been imagining it as like, if you drop the needle on some like cool old sample. It was almost like had a hip hop thing is what we initially were imagining.
That's funny.
It was just going to be the 2 guitars, but when you're making music, you imagine things that aren't before you. And it's like we tried doing that, and it didn't work. But also we had that kind of sense of the march thing, da, ga, 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 da, 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 da. And I don't know, just what we'd come up with kind of just, it didn't all add up to something. So we just, spent an afternoon and kind of rewrote it quickly in an hour and came up with the bridge in the middle. And a lot of that stuff like was really pretty spontaneous. Like we'd kind of ruminated on this music for a long time, and we put it down and it kind of sucked. And then we just quickly made a bunch of changes and then went into the studio and recorded it. And that was what the record turned out to be.
It's really tough to name instrumentals. What Bone Collector, was there like, was
Jules? Jules has this brilliant thing that he did like 5 years ago. He got a copy of there's like an index of like the Paris Review of like all these issues, like for 100 years or something like that, and read through all the titles of these poems and like little literature things, and just wrote down all the titles that seemed evocative. And so he's got this list, this huge, pages upon pages upon pages upon pages, titles. And so when it comes time to name something, you just kind of listen to the song and just scan the list until you're like, yep,
there you
that's
go.
what that is.
Very cool. That makes life a lot easier too.
I know, because trying to actually just come up with the right name out of thin air for what something is like, it's
instrumentals, hard. It's really, unless it's like specifically about something, it's tough, man.
Yeah.
You got another song on there called Henry. Another beautiful ballad. So now in this one, this is what I was curious about. Both of the guitars like kind of wrap around each other, and I don't think I've ever heard anything like that before. It's almost like you're talking about having a vision. I almost saw like DNA strands.
Cool.
The way I've never heard anything like that with that. It wasn't like a whole song. It was a section, but it was really nice. And I was curious, was that deliberate, or is that just how it wound up working when you guys were soloing?
That would definitely be just how it wound up working. Honestly, I haven't listened to the record probably since we finished making it. So I can't even recall if we did sometimes we'll do things where we'll improvise together, which sounds like maybe that was going on there. And I don't know, it just kind of happens sometimes, you'll just get a good conversation going, and I enjoy when I can't tell who's who. Yeah. Which happens sometimes when we do that.
Great track. And then Sleeping by Myself, beautiful melody. You're singing that, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Your vocals.
Although, you know who, we didn't write that song. And actually Julian wrote Henry. We wrote Bone Collector together. Julian wrote Henry, and Henry, just to back up for a sec, is on his new record, his electric record, Modern Lore. It's called Whatever You Say, Henry. It might be interesting for people who like Julian, there are two versions of the same tune.
That's very cool.
But Sleeping by Myself that's Eddie Vedder made this record of ukulele songs. Do you know about this thing?
No, I know. No, but I know Eddie Vedder, and I've seen them in concert, and I've seen him play ukulele, but I didn't know he made a record of it.
He made a whole record of ukulele songs, and when we were looking for songs, Jules was like, there's actually this pretty cool Eddie Vedder thing. You should check it out. And so I did, and man, there are a few just ringer tracks on there, really cool songs, and that was one of them. Just we kind of wanted a slow heartbreaker kind of
that's why I thought it was about a breakup. That's why I was like, well, wait a minute, it must have been, I know you're in a relationship now. I was like, maybe this was an old laying around, but okay, it's Eddie's. That makes sense.
Your
voice is great on there, man. Your singing voice is fantastic, man. Really nice.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fun to do that. I don't really, I sing harmony in Punch Brothers, but Thiele does all the lead vocal stuff. So it's actually something I enjoy about playing with Jules, is getting to sing lead more often. In recent years, I'm kind of getting back into the guitar right now, but for several years, I kind of was just, it ebbs and flows, and I was not that interested in guitar, to be completely honest.
Really?
Just
a little burned out?
Yeah, maybe so, actually. And playing with Julian really helped kind of reignite my fire for that. I mean,
that's great.
That's he's just, what can you say about him? I mean, he's like, just he's going to go down in the history books. We'll put it that way. And
there you go.
And so to get to play in a guitar duo with him is incredible. It's one of the highlights of my life, musical or otherwise. And so that's helped with that. But yeah, for a little while, I was kind of just not feeling the guitar. It was fine. I didn't hate it, but I just didn't want to do it. And singing was kind of felt like an interesting new way to kind of be expressive.
It's tough what you do because your hobby is your vocation.
Yeah.
And usually you take a hobby as something that you enjoy. Like for me, guitar is a hobby. So I play it to get away from my vocation. And so I'm not really going to get tired of it.
Yeah.
It's hard but I get tired of my work all the time. Not all the time, but sure. Periodically, like everybody else. So I could totally understand how you can go in and out from periods of time for that, for sure, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's talk about Ashore. That's the new record from the Punch Brothers. It was released last month, so it was released July of 2018. It hit number 1 on the bluegrass charts immediately. And for anybody listening, if they're not familiar with Punch Brothers, these guys are like incredibly talented acoustic musicians. Basically guitar, mandolin, upright bass, fiddle, and banjo. And this is just me. The music is a kind of a blend of bluegrass, Americana, country, and classical. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there are definitely elements of all those things. I mean, there's a real kind of chamber music aspect to the group that I think is maybe like one of its strongest characteristics, which is something that I really value about the band. I mean, there's room for improvisation in Punch Brothers, but whereas with Julian, playing with him is a lot. It's really about improvising, in its most basic form. Punch Brothers is about arrangement and composition and ensemble work, and so yeah, it's a really fun band to be in, but disciplined in a different way.
Yeah,
but I love it. I mean, it's also like can't believe I get to be in that band with those musicians. It's crazy.
Yeah, you're all very talented. Couple of comments or questions. This is the band's 5th full-length record, and there's 9 songs on it. This is funny. I wrote, if you told me, T-O-L-E. If you told me, I got this. Like, if you said to me, hey, this is not 9 songs, this is like one opus, with 9 sections or movements or components, I would be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And was that like on purpose or?
Kind of, yeah. This record was definitely written with the whole in mind. In fact, we actually wound up changing the track listing sort of at the last minute, but it was written actually in sequence.
It was written
with an actual sequence in mind. So there was definitely a concept of the whole, for sure. I mean, the last 2 songs of the record definitely have always been meant to go together. Like they're kind of, you can't divide them. But yeah, the whole thing was pretty conceived of as one big thing that kind of progresses linearly.
It sounded like that, and it sounded great. I just want to talk a couple of songs. The Gardener.
Yeah.
Again, beautiful melody. It was a very sad song, I thought. And there was a lot of empty space in that song. And for me anyway, it kind of like made my mind wander a little bit more than I wasn't, I was like, it was like walking through the woods, but I get to look around and see, oh, there's a path over there. Oh, there's some little shrubs over there, as opposed to being guided through a certain place. I had like a lot of freedom to interpret the music.
That song has a lot more space. Well, I mean, All Ashore is an interesting record. It had the entire record has a lot more space than previous Punch Brothers records. It like this record, we didn't intend for it to be this way. It's just kind of how it came out, but it's kind of more mellow. So I think space was a thing that we never talked about it, but that we were all kind of working on and listening for and trying to build into the music this time. But The Gardener is definitely the slowest, quietest song on the record. And yeah, it's got that kind of fingerpick guitar figure that is like kind of shifting tonality every beat or every, half measure. But yeah, I don't know. It's yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to say about it.
Is this about an actual gardener, or is it, because I got the feeling, then I'm thinking, man, maybe it's like a gardener, but it really stands for something else.
Well, it's kind of I mean, so here's the thing. Thiele writes all the lyrics in the band. We all have veto. We write the music together, collaboratively, but he really is the lyricist. Now we all have veto power. We joke it's like the United Nations. Everybody has veto power, but on the lyrics. But I think it's kind of a meditation on kind of just like class, really, more than anything. And just, yeah, I think that's kind of the subtext of what's going on with that song.
It's really, really good song, man. I enjoyed that. And then, Like It's Going Out of Style, I thought that was a really cool song to close the album. It was because whereas a lot of the album is again a little melancholy, this was optimistic, uplifting, and I thought it was a really, it's a great way to leave the listener, feeling like that as they close it out. Well, when I was curious what you guys are talking about when you say "love it like it's going out of style."
Again, you'd have to talk to Thiele because those are. I mean, I kind of have my own idea of it, but I don't know. I'll leave that for him.
For my conversation with Chris.
When you start doing this satellite podcast, everybody loves mandolin.
Everybody loves mandolin.
Everyone loves mandolin. Yeah.
Okay, I was curious about it. Great album, man. And I hope the album does well. I mean, it's already number one in bluegrass, but I hope you get, I hope people buy it a lot, if that's a thing anymore. Stream it a lot, whatever,
Thank you.
It's a great record. Both of them are really good. I was happy to listen to them.
Thanks, man.
I don't know if you could answer this. You've been involved in so many cool projects. Is it possible to pull like your top 3 things that you've enjoyed musically, whether it's because of your work that you did in there that you're proudest of, a good hang, good experience, fun times, whatever?
Like album wise?
Anything. No, it could be just a gig you did, any experience. Count each experience you've had as separate, it could be a track on an album that you recorded, something, top 3 things. And I would go with like your knee jerk reactions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would just, I would, in all honesty, say just being able to play in Punch Brothers is pretty incredible. That's like very much a once in a lifetime kind of band.
Sure.
And also getting to play with Julian would be another one. I mean, I know we just talked about those, but they really kind of spring to mind as things where I feel just so deeply fortunate to get to, that I've gotten to do that. I mean, as far as like memorable gigs, I remember when we played Carnegie, the big room at Carnegie Hall, Stern Auditorium. That was a very memorable thing, not only because it's, we're musicians and that's on every musician's bucket list is to play Carnegie, but what was so actually memorable about it was that was the most beautiful sounding room. I mean, just my knees, I was so nervous, my family, everybody's families like traveled up to New York for that. And walking on stage, I don't get nervous. Like I've been doing this a long time. Like I don't typically get nervous about stuff, but my knees were like, I mean, they were shaking, before we walked on stage. And I remember we got out there and played the first few notes, and it was like, and then the next thing I remember, like we were like backstage again. The show was over, and it was just, the room sounded so beautiful. And that was like a real highlight of my musical life, was just that show and getting to be there. And then other things are just getting to spend time around all the great musicians we've got to hang with, like working with Punch Brothers, working on all of our records. Like, we've had a series of incredible producers who we got to like learn from. Like, that's been pretty amazing, getting to make a record with John Bryan and T-Bone Burnett, and just like see Jakir King, see how they approached the process of recording music. I think has been kind of like invaluable, and just there's been like deep lessons. I feel like each one of those guys is like a shaman or something like that in their own way. T-Bone especially.
Yeah, T-Bone's pretty. Sorry.
Yeah. I was just going to say, but like, John Bryan had so much, he's such a master musician. I mean, John Bryan's insane. And he had so much great stuff to say when we were making that record, stuff that kind of really changed the outlook that I have. And I think all of us had about making music going forward, things like practical advice that as like a serious musician that you kind of need. It was really cool. It was great. Learned a lot.
I actually played at Carnegie Hall when I was 13. I played tenor sax when I was in the Bronx Borough Band. And that year, and they made us, I'll tell you two things we did. One is did they still have the book where you get to sign in?
I don't remember that.
They had this,
maybe,
massive, like, double phone book thing that you had to sign your name in there. I remember doing that. And then the other thing was what you talked about, the acoustics. I was 13 or 14. A bunch of us stood on the stage, and a bunch of kids went up to the top and we talked to them. Yeah. And it was amazing because you didn't really have to talk much louder than your speaking voice, which was like mind blowing.
Well, you know what it was originally built for? It was not it is not meant to be a music hall. It was like a public address space. It was like a public event space back before there was electricity and there were PAs. Like Mark Twain would go to Carnegie Hall, or there'd be like New York meetings of great import to the city would happen at Carnegie Hall. That. Yeah, it was like a public meeting space basically, where you'd have speakers and they just knocked the acoustics out of the park so much that it became really revered as this music venue. But it initially was kind of for speaking.
I didn't know that.
There were PAs and stuff. Yeah.
Very easy to believe, like I said. And I remember then we switched. The kids that were on the bottom went up to the top. It was just really an interest. I remember that like it was yesterday, man. And it was 40 years ago, probably 41, 42 years ago.
Yeah, that's cool.
Tuition. Let's talk about tuition. Everybody, no matter what we're doing, makes mistakes and pays some tuition and learns. I was wondering if you'd be kind enough to maybe share one or two mistakes that you made along your musical journey, and what were the lessons you might have learned from those mistakes?
I mean, I've made plenty of mistakes. I mean, the things that spring to mind are, it's almost less, I prefer to think of it less as a mistake, but maybe I've learned some things about just like hands on the guitar kind of, or just like sense of being a musician. I've kind of learned about mindfulness, and how that like the mistake would be basically trying to solve problems by beating my head against them like they're a brick wall, and eventually if you keep going, you'll break through the wall, and that can work. And I've kind of brute forced my way through a lot of stuff. I mean, that's how I learned to play guitar. It was nobody taught me. I just kind of brute forced my way through it. So it's kind of good, but at the same time, as I've gotten older and learned more, I've learned the real importance of and the profound importance of mindfulness and kind of treating yourself with a sense of empathy as you're trying to learn something. Like you know, there's this great book that I'm actually reading right now that Brian Sutton told me about like 10 years ago. And I read a similar book, but not this one, called The Inner Game of Tennis. Do you know about this book?
No.
Man, it's killer. It's so good. It is just so, so good. And I would encourage literally probably everybody who listens to this to check it out, because there's actually one called The Inner Game of Music. That's the one that I read back then, which is kind of this built on the same concepts, but tailored towards musicians. And for whatever reason, I did not vibe with that. I didn't like it. But The Inner Game of Tennis, it's the same. I mean, they're just, it's
same author,
different author, but same principles.
Okay.
and clearer. The principles are a lot clearer. And these are principles that can apply to anything. And it's just about like essentially getting out of your own way. That's you have your conscious brain that kind of gets in your way when you're trying to learn stuff or perform, do anything at a high level. So yeah, I've learned a lot about not trying too hard, kind of letting your kind of unconscious, like nervous system, like all this kind of behind the scenes part of your neurology and yourself kind of take control, and like trusting that, and how much more profoundly you can make progress that way, and how less likely you are to fuck things up when you kind of aren't thinking about that. Like that's something I've really been kind of thinking about on my own over the last, I don't know, 5 years. But then now I'm reading this book, and it's really helping me kind of even clarify and crystallize those ideas. But even something as simple as like playing with a metronome, and how if you're practicing with a metronome, like you shouldn't try and actually play with the metronome. The metronome's not right or wrong, and neither are you. Like, and this might sound esoteric and kind of like woo-woo, but I think it's very real. The essence of doing that well is it's just agreeing with the metronome. In other words, the metronome's doing a thing, and it's doing it at a certain sense of a certain pace. And if you're not with the metronome, that's not good or bad. It's just what it is. It's just a thing that's happening. And if you can kind of refocus and just kind of agree, kind of get on the same wavelength with the metronome, rather than trying to be in time with the metronome. It's subtle, but those are two very different things.
And it's all up in here, man. It's the amount of pressure that you're putting on yourself to tie yourself to something that might not even matter, or it matters, but it's like, it's not. I think it's a really important concept. And as I've gotten older, I've done the same thing. I've tried to be more forgiving with myself and cutting myself more slack, and recognizing when I'm in a situation that's just fucking collapsing my head because it's just not working. And the answer is change. Don't do it. It's not right. I have this expression I developed a while ago, and it's like, it's similar to what you're talking about. When we've all dug ourselves a hole, human nature is to dig faster. Yeah. And in reality, I think we need to put down the shovel, and step out of the hole, and then, look at it like that. But I think I don't think it's esoteric. I think it's an incredibly important concept of not having to kill yourself to get everything done.
Yeah. And just kind of be, observe things with, kind of be detached and, as unemotional and just kind of analytical, but not judgmental when you're observing anything. And so especially the context of this conversation, we're talking about guitars and stuff like it's like a power up,
Yeah, totally.
To have like that new way to approach things. It's just way more efficient, way more effective way to learn. But also, I think that's very much a kind of a life skill. It's a thing that has like true and universally applicable value.
It does. Like, I know for me, the thing I'm like super aware. So I'll know when something's like, this is, pretty early on, I'm good with warning signs of this is not working or watch out. My flaw is I grew up in a really stressful environment. So I'm not smart enough to then say, okay, you need to shift. Because my natural tendency is to be comfortable with stress and to just power through any shit put in front of me. And I'm really working hard now and I'm doing much better, but I need to, but I'm still recognizing that, okay, this is not a fit. I need to not do this.
Yeah.
I'm still investing too much of my energy into it. And I'm going to look at that book, because if I can somehow, man, even I'm a creature of habit to some extent. So I always set reminders. So even something as simple as, once a week, evaluate everything, real simple, evaluate everything you're doing. Is it moving in flow? Is it not? Do you need to not do, I systematically, until it becomes second nature. That's how I kind of have to do things. But I'm really looking forward to that, because this is
it. Yeah, it's wonderful. And totally. I mean, we all kind of get so caught up in doing things the way we're used to doing them, and just kind of pushing through problems the way we think we can control stuff. But if you think about how you learn to walk and talk, there's no controlling there. I mean, you just try and it didn't work, and you tried it again, but you weren't judgmental. You didn't worry about it. You just kind of observed what happened and what didn't happen, and you just kind of kept doing it. And I feel like as you get older and kind of I think it's your frontal cortex kind of thinking kind of kicks in. You think you can control everything. You think you need to understand everything before you can do it. But just as you couldn't explain to someone how to walk, you can't explain yourself out of complex problems or how to do things that are complex. And I think kind of really cultivating that sense of awareness of what things actually are, and kind of letting them and accepting them and letting them be. And then, I don't know, I just think that that's a really very powerful thing that's kind of new for me, at least in terms of thinking about it with my conscious mind, and realizing that I can take my conscious attention and almost shine it like a light on something that I want to be aware of, and then kind of step back from it.
Well, it's only important if you want to have less stress in your life.
Yeah.
No, seriously. If you
and who wants that?
Yeah. Well, no, there are people, man. It's they thrive on it, but I'm totally down on having. I mean, I think I have here no stress. I'm totally down on having less.
Yeah. Life's too short. Sutton he really has hit me to a lot of that. He's read a ton of books about human performance and just performance stuff, and he's really wise about all that stuff. I mean, he's kind of hit me to how powerful just being smarter about the way you approach things in a basic way can be.
Well, he's also,
that sounds stupid, but
no,
he's just devoured all a lot of that literature, a lot of the classic literature on that kind of stuff, and man, look at what it's done for him. I mean, he's
well, he's also so good at what he does that he knows, okay, if he goes up here,
right,
he can make some adjustments that will have some serious implications on this,
Well, and honestly, I feel like the reason that he's at 99%, I mean, he's an incredibly gifted guy, and he's really, really smart, and really has a really keen, present intellect. He's very present. But he's blessed with a really good nervous system. He's got good hands, and I feel like he was already going to get up to a 90, just by doing his thing. But I feel like he's kind of gotten himself up to 99 through all this kind of stuff. Yeah. You just even on the guitar, because there's so much of playing guitar that's once you kind of start reaching a high level at anything, you kind of have to start being creative in how you surmount obstacles. And like for me, I'm not particularly gifted physically. Like I've really had to work hard, and I'm kind of inherently klutzy, and so it's been cool, like reading this book. I know that a lot of those things, though, I've put barriers in my way based on trying to essentially beat my head against the brick wall, and in doing so, that got me to a certain point. But in doing that, it actually wound up like, I don't know. It's just made it more difficult. And actually, there's a nice way if you kind of look over here, and there's actually another way that you can just walk around the wall. And I'm trying to like get build my awareness enough to kind of get that. But even with the goal of like being a better physical player, like making my hands and body work better, because there's a huge component of that too. That's just really trusting your body that I think is profound. And all the great musicians I know have, just whether they cultivated it or whether that awareness was naturally, they just had a real natural intelligence in that way. They all kind of can do that.
The other thing about Sutton is he's really pretty balanced.
Mm-hmm.
For a guy who's as busy as he is. I mean, and he's not the guy he's not a Facebook dad. Like, I know he's not putting a picture of, you know what I'm talking about? Like Facebook
mm-hmm.
moms and dads. It's like, it's this contrived bullshit scenario where like, that, oh my God, this must be that's not him. He puts some pictures on social media, which shows me, he's genuinely enjoying his family life, and he does a really good job of balancing it with travel and all that stuff. So I think, he's a really together guy.
I admire him so much. He's like a really dear friend and just a real role model,
Very cool, man.
Yeah.
Hey, I know nothing about acoustic guitars, as you can probably tell, but I know a lot of my listeners know quite a bit. So if you could talk about like, what's your go-to guitar right now? And maybe it's that Martin 1937, and what other guitars might round out your top three, that would be great.
Oh yeah. Well, playing live lately, I've returned to, I've got a 1954 D28 Martin, that I played, on the first Punch Brothers record, Punch. And I've actually played it on the Chris Thile record, How to Grow a Woman from the Ground, which was ostensibly the first Punch Brothers record, but he was just he had to get out of his old record contract, so he made that thing. But it was the band. And so that was like my main guitar for a long time. And then when I started getting some 30s Martins, I kind of put the 54 on the shelf because they're just built differently. They're braced differently. They're different creatures. They behave differently as guitars. So, and I got really intoxicated with the kind of golden era ones from the 30s, and put this 54 Uncle Johnny on the shelf. But I recently, on speaking of Sutton, on his advice, I finally went ahead and drilled out the end pin from my 54 D28 and put a pickup jack in there and had a pickup installed in this guitar and had a mic put in. And now I'm using it. I travel on the road with it. So that's what I'm using in Punch Brothers right now.
Isn't that sacrilege though, to do that with an older guitar?
Well, that's why I didn't do it for a long time, but it's not sacrilege compared to doing it to like a 30s Martin,
Yeah.
And also this guitar, Uncle Johnny, had been beat all to hell. I mean, at one point, it had a bolt through bridge, which is not a thing that happens with Martin guitars at all.
Yeah.
But it's already totally fucked up in that respect. It's got a bunch of cracks. And if you see a picture of it, I mean, it's clear it's fairly, it's been through the ringer. So I just kind of felt like I love this guitar. I'm not ever playing it anymore. And
what's the downside?
What's the downside? It's a great guitar and it's going to have life again. So I've been playing that with Punch Brothers, and it's actually a really rad setup. I'm very thrilled with the guitar sound that we've got going on now. And so I've got what is it? It's a little microphone mounted in the guitar, but then there's also the hell's it called? Baggs Lyric, which is like a pickup system essentially. And then they both kind of go, those two signals, the mic and the Lyric, go out through a stereo TRS cable into a little Grace Felix preamp, which can split the two signals. So, and it's got two channels. That Grace Felix is so good. It's such a badass little preamp. I mean, and not to, I actually do endorse it, but like, but I mean, not formally. It's just like, I don't know. They hooked me up with, because I wanted one because it's so awesome.
Great.
And I feel like that's a major part of this working really well. Is Felixes are killer. And then I got a little Empress Para EQ, which is like a 3-band parametric EQ that I've got. So I can basically have a little bit more control, because it's weird, amplifying an acoustic guitar without having a mic in front of it is just inherently a stupid thing to do. It doesn't work. That's not how those guitars work. They put sound out in front, but what you have to do is you're capturing all the sound from within. So you get a bunch of weird resonances. So having a bunch of parametric EQ available is key. So yeah, basically with that, I've got some extra parametric EQ, and that's kind of my acoustic guitar rig. Now, when Jules and I we play around a single microphone. We just there are no mics on the instruments or anything like that. We just have one Neumann U89 that captures voices and the guitars. That's just set in wide cardioid, and we play into that. And it's nice because we can play more dynamically, but also we're face to face. We can just really hear each other. It just makes it a lot easier to be really interactive, truly interactive. Whereas, like, if you're wearing in-ear monitors, which is what we do in Punch Brothers, you're just inherently a little bit more separated. You got a thing piped into your ear, and it's different. It's hard to be as empathetic
the physical space that you can't get next to each other. It's just not the same, I would imagine. Like you can't get in each other's circle and vibe in there.
Yeah, and the thing is too, like, even if you're standing right next to someone, if you have an in-ear monitor in your ear, it's like they're molded, or the ones that we have are molded, so like they block out all actual acoustic sound. You're just hearing the transducer sending sound into your ear. And so, Punch Brothers actually did single mic stuff for a while. After our last record, The Phosphorescent Blues, after we kind of finished the main touring for that, we did some single mic tours where the whole band was just around, again, one U89. And that was so fun. That was so fun. I loved doing that, because even with the 5-piece band, you can totally make it work. And it just requires that everybody be so present and listen. And it's a great way to play music.
You know what? Now that explains, like, I've watched some videos of you guys, and I'm like, wow, these dudes are like right on top of one another. And I was trying to figure out, again, I'm not a musician, right? I'm not a stage performer. If I was, I would have known, they're all around the microphone. But I was like, wow, these guys are really close, I guess. But now I understand. Yeah. I was like, wow, this is very intimate. Okay, that's fine, whatever.
Yeah.
But now I understand. It's like you were in there's no, you want to be connected, and you got to hear each other, and you got to play together. So now I get it now. Yeah,
there's actually a pretty cool concert of Punch Brothers where it was from Charlottesville, Virginia. I forget the name of the place, but it's like a whole show that's just around the single mic, and you can kind of hear, it sounds good. Like you can kind of hear everything. It's a neat proof of concept to be able to see it. Now we've got two mics on stands that sort of pick up some ambient sounds, but we all have, mics on our instruments. But hopefully we're going to Europe in November, and we'll be doing the single mic thing again.
That's great, man. Thanks for explaining all that, because I know there's people listening to this that are going to want to know the details of like every, wire that's involved. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean it's dorky, but it actually stuff makes a difference.
No, it does make a difference. Definitely. That's why I knew that. And it's not my thing. That's why I really appreciate you explaining it.
Totally.
Tell me about a couple of players you've really enjoyed jamming with, and is there like another one or two you'd like to jam with?
Oh gosh. Oh boy. I mean, there's so many. Getting to play with Brad Mehldau was like a real life highlight, or musical highlight, certainly. That was, he and Thiele play together, but he played on the radio show last year, and we got to play, a couple songs with him. And what was so cool about that was he listened so hard. He listened so well that it changed how everybody else was listening. And I don't know if I can describe it. I don't know if that'll even make sense, but it's sort of like, how it's different. The experience of listening to an album, if you're sitting by yourself on your couch, listening to something on your stereo, is different than if you're listening to that same album with your friend who either loves or hates the album.
Yeah.
And you just get influenced. They don't have to say a word, but you're just influenced. You can kind of feel there's some kind of human, weird, mystical vibe thing where and your experience of the album changes. Well, Brad Mehldau had such a powerful force, like in the way that he was listening to the musicians on stage when we were playing the song, that it really made everybody else listen a lot harder.
That's great.
No words were spoken, but it was mystical. It was really cool. That was really, there was like some profound lesson in that. It was pretty eye opening. Other people, what else was cool? Well, actually on the radio show, weirdly, we backed up Trey Anastasio.
That's wild.
However you say his name, the guy from Fish.
Yeah, that's wild.
And, that was also really cool. Like it was really good. I don't quite understand why it was so good, but he kind of had some sort of magical vibe thing happening as well. That was great. I don't know. I'm mostly curious about, I mean, a lot of people are like virtuosos and everything, but what gets me is when someone can affect everybody else's vibe by kind of their mystical vibe thing. Like that's because you don't even have to be a great virtuoso to make great music, and it's all the better if you are. You just have more available at your fingertips. But there's certain people who just make everybody around them play better and even listen better. Even the audiences listen better. Like there's some weird thing about Trey Anastasio that I just don't understand it at all. But and Fish is not something that I have much interest in like listening to on an album. I mean, I totally respect him and it's great to do their thing.
It's not your thing.
But it's not my bag. But like obviously, he's casting some kind of thing out even to the listeners of the band that's like pretty intoxicating. I saw Fish, Punch Brothers and Fish have we're managed by the same guy.
Okay.
And
did you open for them or something, or at one time?
They played in New York. We were on tour with a day off in New York last summer. They did these shows at Madison Square Garden called the Baker's Dozen. And this was after we'd played with Trey on the radio show. So I was just kind of curious, like, because that had been this really wild experience. I was like, I kind of want to go to the Fish show and just check this out. And again, it was like on paper, it wasn't necessarily what I would love. But it was, and Julian went and we had the same exact conversation. He was like, I'm actually using his words. He was like, on paper, this is not something I would dig, but somehow it's like really captivating and good. Like, I don't even understand what it is. And so
So
I think there's
putting out some mojo,
like
man.
Yeah, there's some kind of thing, and that's really fascinating to me. I don't know what it is or how it works, but like in very different ways, I feel like Brad Meldau and Trey Anastasio, who are pretty different kinds of musicians, put out this really profound, cool thing that I was really something.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. Anybody you'd want to jam with?
Oh boy, I mean. Yeah, Wayne Shorter. I don't know. That would be there. Oops. Gosh, who? I've gotten to play with a lot of people I'd like. Oh yeah, yes, there is someone. Jim Keltner. Definitely, Jim Keltner is also. Speaking of a mystical musician, to me, there's almost no one more mystical than Jim Keltner. And I've gotten to stand on stage with him and play like among 30 other people, but I've never actually played with him interactively. I'd love to do that sometime. I mean, I don't even know how to talk about Jim Keltner. He's profound. Also, I've never played with Frizzell. I kind of know Frizzell a little bit, but I've never gotten to play music with him.
He's in the city again, I think, right?
He is. Yeah, I think he moved back. Yeah. And he's I'd love to play with him sometime. I mean, he's just again, I don't know, when you start talking about like people who are so awesome, like I just don't have words. Words kind of fail me. I'm just like, I don't know. I love it.
If I have either of these two guys on the show, I'll make sure to let you know, and then you can send me in a couple of questions as well. So
yeah, perfect.
Making a note of that right here. Man, this is a Desert Island Discs.
Ooh,
that's really
okay. Well,
tough.
Definitely Church Street Blues by Tony Rice.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question. Don't even have to think about that one. God, past that. Oh,
Fish live at the no.
Yeah. There's so much. There's just so much music that I love. I'm trying to think of. I don't know. Maybe I probably have to have some. What would it be? I don't know. I mean, there's all this great Bach that I love. I mean, it'd be hard to not take some of that stuff, or like some of the, late Beethoven string quartets or Mozart. I mean, yeah, it'd be hard to go without some killer classical music. Debussy string quartet. Yeah, but I can't narrow it down. I just can't narrow it down.
It's all right. What would be number 3?
Number 3. Let's see. It'd have to be something on balance. Maybe something like either like a James Brown or D'Angelo or something like that.
James Brown is such a badass. Old James Brown, like I love that era, late 60s, early 70s. It's like pure awesome funk. I mean,
forget about it.
He's just doing his thing, or as he said, do what we do.
Yeah.
It's just incredible.
Yeah. Oh, you know what another great thing is? And I haven't listened to this record. I was just thinking about it, but I haven't listened to it in years. But a record that I always loved was The Incredible Jazz Guitar by Wes Montgomery. That's a beautiful record.
I have to check that one out. I've never heard that one.
That's
Incredible Jazz Guitar.
Yeah, it's old school. I think it's like Riverside, but it's really it kind of sounds rough. There's like some distortion in the recordings, and they're just kind of getting down. But there's some beautiful ballads on there. There's actually, I heard this. There's some viral thing that is viral this week called "Bitch, I'm a Cow."
No.
I mean, I don't even know how I found out about it, but I was just like, what is this? And so I clicked on it, and it's actually, they sampled this song that's why I was thinking about it, because they sampled this song from the incredible jazz guitar. I think it's called Polka Dots and Moonbeams. Anyway, it's this ballad. Don't go, don't.
Bitch, I'm
Wes
a
Montgomery.
cow.
Bitch, I'm a cow. I mean, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I just heard enough to be like, oh shit, that's Wes Montgomery they sampled. And this thing is like weirdly going ultra viral right now.
That sounds like something my older son would send like to the whole family on, a message on Facebook or something like that.
Yeah.
Bitch,
Well, if
I'm
he
a
sends
cow.
it and you hear those octaves on the guitar ascending, that's Wes.
That's Wes Montgomery.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey man, this is a tough question, Chris. What do you like most about yourself?
Oh, that is a weird question, but let's see. What do I actually genuinely like about myself? I think I'm open-minded and maybe kind-hearted. I think those are kind of, but I think I'm actually pretty open-minded, and I like that.
Yeah. The vibe you give me, you're incredibly kind-hearted, man, to be honest with you.
Oh,
I just get that
you.
vibe from you. Yeah, man, you're a very genuine person.
Thanks.
Flip side. Oh, we'll see.
Well,
we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I know one thing that I'm confronted with often, just because I realize that I'm doing it, is like be a little narcissistic. Like I'm not proud of this, but
really?
Like I'll watch. Well, not like clinical narcissism. I'm not like I wouldn't be in the DSM.
You're not getting
what I'm saying.
You're not getting DSM codes for it.
No, I'm not.
You couldn't get
like
it onto
that.
your insurance.
I'm not like that, but I don't like. I definitely, will watch. I read my own press or like watch videos and read the comments on YouTube, and I just feel like I need to be like more. I feel like I'd like to not. I do that to kind of feed some insecure part of me.
Yeah, I get that.
So there's that's
not narcissism. That's like feeding some insecure part of you. What you just said. Narcissism. I mean, to me anyway. When I think of someone's narcissistic, it's like it's selfish. It's someone who's selfish. Or very self-absorbed, or and you meet people like this that their favorite topic is them. Right. To me, that's what I think about when I describe some man, they're really narcissistic. Well, when you start talking about someone else as being narcissistic, if somebody's presenting that, I guess that's kind of a different thing. It's like it's on a scale. I don't think I'm. Yeah, I don't. Narcissists can be really rough people. I'm not claiming that mantle for myself at all. But like, just that. So I guess actually what I'm talking about is a sense of insecurity. Yeah, I can understand that. Sure. That gets. That I think is pervasive. That and. You're in a tough profession. Because from that standpoint, because if you don't give a shit, the way you get paid, ranked, judged is how many people like you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard in your situation to be, whether you're on stage or in the studio, like, fuck it, man. I don't care if they like it or not. Right. That's not, I think that you can get there. That's not without being, and you don't want to be like, fuck you, I don't care. But you almost want to have, like you talked about, detachment. Yeah. That's like what you're probably looking for. And that's hard because. That is what I'm looking for. Yeah. Trying to get like a little bit more spiritually enlightened without actually becoming super spiritual. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm with you, man. Yeah. I'm with you, but yeah, I mean, it's hard, I mean, for me, I know I've, and I'm actually really kind of opening up here saying this, but like, I feel like I'm very fortunate in that I get to, make music, and I've, with all these like really high level people, like, Chris Thiele, greatest mandolin player that has
literally ever lived in the history of humanity. Like, shit, I'm in a band with that guy.
Right.
Like, Noam Pikelny, like, kind of, he's sitting there right there with Bela as like greatest banjo player alive. Julian, they're like all these people who I work closely with are these really, really heavy people, and that's a blessing and it's a curse. And for me, I think that maybe sometimes I've let that beat me down rather than lift me up, and I think you have to, I think, to be fair, I would have to say to myself that like any of these people could do this stuff with literally anyone they wanted to in the world. And I'm the guy who was called. And so and who continues to be there. And so that's like a sense of, I feel, good about that. But at the same time, there's a voice in the back of your head when you're with people who are really doing whatever it is they do at the very highest level, that can be tough, and also like I'm not a virtuoso on the level that like Noam and Feely and say Julian are, just physically. I can't, I'm a good guitar player, but I'm not, I can't play guitar like Brian can.
Yeah.
Physically. And so there are these things where it can be hard for me, and I can get down and almost, lose faith.
You have is it a piece of you feeling undeserving?
Just like, just kind of like, I don't know if it's undeserving. No, I think I actually feel deserving. If I step back, I kind of am like,
Good.
no, well, there's no one else who would be doing this any better. But I also,
I would
because
agree
I know
with
that there are unique things that I can bring to the table in these situations. It's weird to be talking this revealingly to like, I don't know how many people. I like rarely. I don't even speak like this with my girlfriend very often. But whatever, it's real. And so yeah, that's a really, it's just a hard thing, and I've certainly struggled with that. And but part of what I'm looking for these days is kind of just a sense of enlightenment about all of it and how I approach my work, and hopefully eventually how I approach the rest of my life. It's all, they're better ways. As you get older, I think one of the things that you realize is that you can choose how you want to be. Like there's a part of you that's encoded, and it's like but you also realize that there's a lot of choice and plasticity.
Tons. It's your life.
It's your life. And that's just so true. It really, really is true. And so I'm kind of at the stage, where I'm just starting to embrace that a little bit more and try and think about the way I want things to be and the way I want things to go. A lot of the musicians I really look up to a lot. Feely, who exemplifies this better than anybody to me is Bela. Bela Fleck is he's obviously an incredible musician, but he's also, I've always admired Bela because I feel like he's always striving to be a better person too, which is really, I almost admire that. He's been one of my musical heroes for forever, so you can just kind of like take that as an assumption. But like I've almost admired this other part of Bela more, that he's just always trying to be a better guy.
Well, man, two things. As you were saying that, I pulled up something. Joe Glazer, I'm assuming, right?
Oh, yeah, Glazer's a buddy of mine, yeah.
So Joe told me something last time I was in Nashville. We were talking, and I wrote it down because it was extremely powerful, and I thought I'd pass it along to you. He said, Craig, to be in something, all you need to do is be there. Mm-hmm. That's it. You know, I think often we look for permission. You don't need any permission. There's no, you know, I wrote a marketing book years ago, and a lot of the stuff was, some of the stuff is involved in this. And I made a comment about, you know, there's no expert fairy. A lot of people in business think, well, I can't do this. I can't say that. And I said, hey, there's no expert fairy that's going to come, you know, flying through your freaking office doors on her wings and, you know, with the, you know, the wand saying, okay, you're an expert now, man. You've got to declare yourself, you know, the expert. And I thought what Joe's, you know, to be in something, all you have to do is be there. I thought that was, man, you know, you're right. I don't need some special permission or, you know, and I thought that might be relevant. The other thing, for whatever it's worth, is, from my opinion, you're way ahead. I mean, for your age, people don't usually start thinking about this stuff until they're in their mid to late 40s, man. So you're, you know, for whatever that's worth, you're light years, dude, you're light years ahead, certainly light years ahead of me. And which may not say much, but I think you're light years ahead of most people along this journey, man. So you're right on target, dude.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
You're welcome, and thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Best childhood memory. It sounds like you had a really, you know, engaging childhood.
Yeah. Boy, best childhood memory. I feel I had a pretty happy childhood. What's a single best memory? I don't know. I can see there's so many good memories, good people. I mean, well, I have some specific memories of music, like kind of exploding in my brain, which are really vivid. When I was like 5, I remember I remember hearing this Tony Rice song when he was with the David Grisman Quintet called Neon Tetra from the record Hot Dog. And there's this part in the middle where the harmony starts moving around and the sand starts shifting a little bit. And I just remember when I was a kid, that always just like made me like sent a chill down my spine when I was like a small child.
Neon Tetra.
And yeah, it's just for whatever reason that kind of, I definitely have specific memories of that. In a more broad sense, I mean, I have this great memory of being out with my mom and stepdad, flying a kite up in Western Maryland one day. We were both wearing blue, me and my stepdad, when I was like 4, probably 5. You know, but a lot of memories of my grandmother, who she died about 6 years ago, but we were pretty tight. She was real cool.
Where did she live?
Well, she lived in my hometown for a while, Fredericksburg, like when I was growing up. She moved there, but she lived in Florida. Actually, she had a house in Fort Pierce.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for a long time.
Not far from here.
Yeah, not that far. And actually, my mom now lives down near Gasparilla Island. You know
that's just St. Pete.
Yeah, well, no, it's beyond. It's like between Sarasota and Fort Myers.
Okay, so it's further south. Yeah,
further south, and that's actually where my grandmother lived out the rest of her life. Was this place Boca Grande? Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, I kind of have a lot of great memories of hanging with my grandma, and I don't know, high school was great. I had a lot of good friends, and I don't know, just hanging out at the river in the summertime, and you know, doing things that probably it's a miracle that we're not dead, but we've survived and have had a lot of happy thoughts to think about it now.
Very cool, man.
Yeah.
Do you have any non-musical superpowers?
Probably not. And I don't know if I have any musical superpowers either. One thing is I've got like a little bit of a Rain Man thing with dates. I'm not full Rain Man, but I can usually identify things at least to the month and the year, if not the exact date. I don't know why that is, but it's a thing. That's
pretty cool, actually. I wish I had that, because I remember everything as long as it's like big picture, but like the little details, but I remember people, feelings, but I don't remember stuff like that, dates ever.
I don't. Yeah, I don't know. I don't care about dates really, or I don't think I get. I guess I do care about them because I remember them. But yeah, it's just this weird thing that like, all right, well, somebody just mentioned they met me at a party, and I was thinking about it. I was like, yeah, that was December 18th, 2016. Like,
That's pretty nutty, man. Good for you.
I know it's right.
You should do that. You got to like turn that into a talent, like where you get to, people come over to you and I can guess your year of birth, something like that, right?
I know.
You have any hobbies or interests outside of music, Chris?
No, nothing that I've like pursued. I feel like being an adult and just like being a touring musician, like I almost don't have time to get deep into anything.
It's tough, man.
I mean, I bought some camping gear last year and have only used it a couple of times, but that's fun.
Reading, camping.
Yeah.
You read a lot.
I mean, I'd love to be a good cook. When I moved to Nashville and actually had a house with a kitchen that you could cook in, I got this great Alice Waters book, The Art of Simple Food, which is a really rad cookbook. So I started cooking out of that a bunch. And sometimes things turned out well, sometimes they didn't. But
it's just the fun of it, man.
That's a fun thing. Yeah, it's amazing to have people over and serve them a meal. Like what a great feeling that is. That's incredible. Not a lot that actually beats that.
That's cool,
just
man.
To have like fraternity with your fellow man, and you actually get to feed them, and hopefully it tastes good. It's cool. Breaking bread.
I remember when I first was in sales. I read a book or 30 years ago, something like that, and it said if somebody ever offers you something, take it because it means they want to break bread with you, and it's a good sign.
Yeah,
I always remember that because I was always the guy like, no, I don't know, I don't want to trouble you, thank you, but I always accepted it. I mean, it was you want a glass of tea? Yes, please, thank you very much.
Oh yeah, see, that's so nice. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it does feel good. It's nice when someone, when you look at it as that, just fellowship and nothing more. It is nice.
Yeah, big time.
2 more questions, man. Toughest decision you ever had to make, or hardest thing you ever had to do that you can talk about, of course.
Leaving the String Dusters was very difficult.
I thought you were going to say that. Yeah, that's a tough thing to do.
That was really difficult, and it was very fraught personally. There was a lot of resentment.
Yeah, I'm sure,
towards me about that, and I felt really bad about it because I'd made a commitment to those guys. We started a band together, but that was tough. Those were like my best friends, and they felt betrayed.
Are they good with that now?
Yeah, we're all cool now.
Good.
I wouldn't have talked about that, and I don't think I would have told you what I just told you 5 years ago. But I think everything's water under the bridge enough now that I think it's okay because it's all cool. Like, still love those guys. I don't see them very often, but they're still really important people in my lives. But that was if I'm being honest, that was a very difficult time.
A number of musicians have told me that same thing, and I totally get it, man.
Well, the thing is, when you're in a band, it's like your family, but it's also like your business partners, your family, but it's also like you're in a romantic relationship. There are a lot of those same kinds of bonds because there's a commitment. You make commitments to each other.
And you're literally living together.
Yeah.
On the road.
Yeah. Yeah. And in that case, even off the road with one guy. But yeah, I mean, it's like a romantic relationship. And so if you leave, sometimes it can be like a breakup.
Yeah. I understand.
Except that you don't just get to break up with one person, you get to break up with 5.
And I get it because I'm a big guy for commitments too. Like, my word means a lot. So I could see some, and you seem to be very similar to that. Like, I could see something like that weighing heavy on me when I've got to just break my word. It's like, it's not.
It was really hard. It was really hard, but we got through it, and I don't regret it.
Good.
I certainly don't regret it. Yeah.
And I'm glad that you guys everything's cool now. Copacetic.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hoping to go visit one of those guys. Actually, we're playing in Colorado next month. Punch Brothers is at Red Rocks.
And wow! Have you played there before?
Once we opened for Wilco there, like 6 years ago.
Kind of weird. That's a weird pairing, no?
Yeah, it was. I don't know. It kind of worked. It was cool. Yeah, it was
Very
good.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Chris, last question. And man, let me tell you, I've enjoyed every minute of this, and I can't thank you enough for your time.
Likewise,
it's really
Greg.
cool,
thank
man.
You for getting
really
in touch
cool
about this. Yeah.
Biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years, and how much that change has been deliberate and intentional, and how much has just been a natural part of aging?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say. I feel like maybe I'm less open in a way than I used to be, or less interested in making sure everybody else is happy. Not that I don't still want that, but I was more of a people pleaser 10 years ago. But I think there's a process of change, hopefully underway now, it's underway, but hopefully it will continue, of just, trying to, like the same stuff we were discussing earlier, wanting to just kind of have more enlightenment and kind of easy. I don't mean easy like life is easy, but just
less stress
and a certain kind of at ease sense of moving towards the things you want in life.
Good for you, man.
Yeah.
Really happy for you.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to tell people, also, I want to talk about Sonic Junction, but let me tell people where to find you. First of all, support Chris Eldridge. Check him out online. He's got the new record with Julian Lage, and that record is called, I'm embarrassed, I've brain fart here, Mount Royal. I apologize.
Right.
It's a wonderful record. Buy it, stream it to support Chris. He's an amazing guitar player, and he's a good artist and a really good singer. And then, of course, the Punch Brothers' new record is called All Ashore, and check that out, and their other albums. And you can find Chris online at punchbrothers.com and at chriseldridge.net, and his last name is spelled Eldridge. It's chriseldridge.net. And also, you're involved with something that's pretty cool called Sonic Junction. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so Sonic Junction, by the way, thank you for all of that. Sonic Junction is it's an online teaching platform that I've been doing for 3 years, and it's kind of a thing that I batch them when I'm home, but it's basically I'm teaching acoustic guitar stuff, like flat picking tunes, which is kind of the style that the acoustic guitar style with a flat pick, where you're playing like fiddle tunes. Think about like Norman Blake and Doc Watson and Tony Rice. So it's basically just like, trying to teach how that whole thing works, and then just a lot of my insights on just good guitar playing and things to think about having to do with music. I mean, I put a new video up. For a long time it was once a week, but now it's every other week. But it's usually about anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes, and I'll teach a piece of music, but that'll be kind of a vehicle for discussing a deeper concept. And it's been really fun. There's a community of people on there who participate, and it's been pretty rewarding for me to see people get better. It's a wild thing.
Oh, you communicate with the students.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm not doing a good job of describing it, because an important part is
sell it, brother. Sell it.
Oh man, I know.
Give me the script. I had no problem selling it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. People post videos, and I'll either write back to them in text or shoot them back a video, and sometimes you'll get students talking to each other. And it's cool. There's a community there, and it's good. I'm real happy to be a part of that.
That's great.
And it's been fun to just try and plumb the depths of what I can things that I feel like I can teach in that format. There's a lot of stuff that you can't teach there. Like people are asking about improvising lately, and it's really hard for me to try and think about how you would actually teach improvising, because that's inherently just a very personal, it's sort of like the essence of improvising is just getting into the sandbox, like when you're a kid, they call it playing music. And I don't think that's not an accident. You play like you play in a sandbox, or like two puppies will play and they'll be looking like they're fighting each other, but they're getting in there and they're engaging with each other and they're playing.
Well, then I think what they're looking for is theory. Because as a guy, that's where I'm at in my stage of now I'm learning, chord tones and scales in different positions and caged and all that stuff. So I could then apply that. I mean, I know how to improvise in the pentatonic boxes, but I'm wanting to learn beyond that, which is why I'm now studying all this other stuff. Right. And I love improvising. I love the feel of it, but I need to have more arrows in my quiver. So
right. Well, maybe the thing I need to get into is talking about triads, because to me, triads are really. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I've talked about triads before, but it's there's such a tricky. To stitch all of this together just requires a lot of just attention and dedication from a student. You just have to be persistent. But if you are, it's all very knowable. Everything about the guitar is very knowable. I feel like, in my experience as a teacher, I feel like what people resist the most is really kind of that state of play and getting in there and being messy and making mistakes. Like one of the greatest things you can do when you're trying to learn something new, or if you got like something in your technique that you're trying to overcome, is to give yourself permission to be just fucking messy, like play it sloppy. Because if you really truly grant yourself that permission, you're removing the voice in your head, or that's saying you're doing that wrong, that then causes you to tense up and then reinforces the wrong thing that you're doing. There can be these vicious loops, and I feel like one of the really tricky things is really for people to let go and surrender to just feeling like they're a fool. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally.
But if you can get that going on, then supplementing that with theoretical concerns and particularly triads. I think triads are one of the most efficient ways to kind of see the fingerboard, and very knowable. And there's a lot of music encoded in triads. So if you can just learn to move through. I mean, now is not the time to teach this. It's not a lesson plan. I'm just starting to think about
Chris is putting his next lesson plan. Did you ever do like one of these, like, in the words of my brother, your rhythm sucks? Did you ever say that?
No, not quite yet.
You really need to work on your rhythm. Your rhythm sucks.
No, everybody's good. It's what's cool being a teacher is that you can you try and like get to the essence of, especially when you're getting feedback or giving someone feedback, is getting to the essence of what they're doing right, but also trying to guide them in a way where they can still figure out the solution for themselves. Because that's the only way that true learning actually happens. You can't have somebody tell you what to do.
Yeah, especially on an instrument.
You can kind of have people point out things that may be hindering them, but you just cannot tell someone what to do. You can kind of guide them to their own sense of discovery.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing. Yeah.
Well, everybody check out Chris on Sonic. What did I say? Sonic Junction. I can't read my own writing. It's just hard. It's like a doctor or something. SonicJunction.com. Go to chriseldridge.net. punchbrothers.com. And dude, I would love to have you back on the show next time you put something else out. Come on, we'll chat. We'll talk about the new record that you got and any project you're doing, and any point in time in the future, a couple of years down the road, we'll come see Chris Eldridge 2.0 and see what's new with you, man.
Awesome. That sounds good.
Thank you so much, man.
And it's been such a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for having me.
Likewise, 100%.
Yeah.
Everybody, thank
Cool.
you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this interview, please share it with a friend on your social media channels. We certainly appreciate your support and help with this. Thanks again to Chris Eldridge for spending all this time with us and being so candid and just like totally freaking cool. I really appreciate it, and support him and the Punch Brothers. Make sure you go to the homepage of everyonelovesguitar.com, sign up to get on our newsletter list, and we'll give you advance notice. You can ask questions to guests coming on the show. And most important, remember that happiness is a choice, so choose wisely. Be nice, go play your guitar, and have fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. I'm out. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.